This episode is brought to you by Health IQ, a very special life insurance company that gives health-conscious individuals the best life insurance rates and quotes. Learn about what they can do for you specifically at healthiq.com/old dog. That's all lowercase letters and dog is spelled D-A-W-G. That's healthiq.com/old dog.
In a world where jobs are how most people make money, one man, one desire, one challenge dares to break the mold. Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where we don't work for money. Money works for us. Coming soon. Viewer discretion advised.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network, where cash flow is king. Real estate investing, the means, so you can enjoy your retirement dreams. This is the show where we cut right to the chase. No sales pitch, no long monologues, just simple how-to real estate investing advice, so you can earn the passive income you need to enjoy your retirement today. And now, your host and chief old dog, Bill Manassero.
Welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network. I'm your host, Bill Manassero, and this is a show where 50-plussers and anyone else who wants to join us get solid, no sales pitch real estate investing advice to help generate real cash flow. This podcast airs twice weekly on Mondays and Fridays, and if you aren't already a subscriber, go to iTunes, type in Old Dog, spelled D-A-W-G, find our podcast, and subscribe. Well, we've got a great show for you today. This is a gentleman who not only did he start off just from scratch on his own, but he did so with commercial properties. Now, you don't hear about that often. Usually people are in real estate and they go into a lot of different areas and then they kind of move into commercial properties. But I mean, his first purchase was literally an office building. So this is going to be a real interesting podcast. Our guest name is Brian Murray. He started Washington Street Properties in 2007 when he acquired his first investment property. Without raising any capital, Murray bootstrapped his way from newbie investor to the owner of a nationally recognized real estate investment and property management firm. He currently manages over 300 doors valued at $35 million. The mix is roughly 50% residential, 50% commercial. Washington Street Properties has been ranked on the Inc. 5000 list of the nation's fastest growing private companies for the past 3 years in a row. The company's success has been achieved through a value-added approach, focusing on the turnaround of distressed and underperforming properties. Brian Murray is also the author of Crushing It in Apartments and Commercial Real Estate, How a Small Investor Can Make It Big. And we'll hear more about that book as we move forward. So, Brian, welcome to the Old Dogs REI Network.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today.
I'm real excited about this show because we really, I feel like I have to apologize to our listeners here. I really haven't covered a commercial in that degree. And I think it's going to be great to just hear how you started off in that field and then, just sort of branched out and moved into various related areas. But can you just kind of give me your story? You know, how did you get started and actually get into real estate investing?
Sure, I'd be glad to, Bill. Well, it was about 10 years ago, and I had recently changed careers. I had been working in the corporate sector, and then stepped off that track for lifestyle reasons and decided I could pursue something that I had an interest in, which was teaching. But as a teacher, I was finding it difficult to make ends meet and pay the bills. And I decided that real estate might be an opportunity for me to get a little extra income and help me make ends meet. So I started to research properties, and I read a lot of books, talked to a lot of people, and tried to learn as much as I could about real estate investing. Started off very similar to what most people might do, kind of looking at single family homes and duplexes and analyzing them. But I wasn't finding the kind of returns that I had hoped for. And I kept reading, kept talking to people and doing my research. And slowly I began to look at a little bit larger and a little bit larger properties. And I still remember one time when a broker came to me and pointed out a large commercial property, much larger than what I had been looking at, and said, "Hey, this could be a great opportunity for you. The seller's very motivated, and they're willing to help with the financing, and you could get into this property for very little money down." And that particular property didn't work out for me, but it really opened my eyes, and I started to look at larger and larger properties. And I eventually settled on a 50,000 square foot office building. And I was able, from the research that I did and analyzing a lot of properties, I was able to come up with some creative financing opportunities to help me bridge the gap and take that big leap forward.
Now that you just did all your research on your own, right? I mean, you really, was it just like books? Did you do seminars? Did you enroll in a program or anything to learn about real estate investing?
It was primarily books and just running the numbers and talking to brokers and really was self-education. I didn't take any classes. I didn't sign up for anything. I just kind of figured it out as I went.
Making your first acquisition in an office building, I think man, talk about baptism by fire there. That had to be a challenge. There are a lot of aspects to that are very tricky, and the leasing and a lot of things that are so different.
Yep.
Just qualifying tenants, I think, would be one of the biggest challenges. Getting the right people in there that are going to stay long term. I think that'd have to be really quite an education process.
Yeah, I'm not gonna tell you that it wasn't intimidating, that I wasn't scared about it. I pretty much had to pull together my life savings to pull it off. I met the gap by I actually assumed the seller's mortgage and got some credits at closing, and the seller's mortgage covered over 90% of the purchase price. The credits covered another chunk of that, and in the end, I ended up having to come up with less than $50,000 to do it. But I got really excited about the property, and in some of the things that I found helped me to overcome those doubts. I just was amazed because it was a beautiful office building, well situated in the middle of town, plenty of parking in a city where parking was at a premium. And yet the building was half empty while the neighboring ones were full. It was clearly not being taken care of at all. The landscaping was overgrown. There was trash everywhere. The windows were being left open on the coldest and hottest days while the air conditioner or the furnace, ran on full blast. And every place I looked, I saw obvious signs of neglect. And on the flip side of that, what I saw was tremendous opportunity and upside potential. The things that were wrong with it, just I felt could be fixed. And even not having the experience, just doing my homework and looking at things that I felt were obvious. Being a local investor, if I was willing to take that hands-on approach, I became convinced that I could make it work.
Wow. Well, had you done a fair amount of market research? Like I would think going into that, you want to make sure there's definitely a demand for office space. Did you, now this is actually, this is to clarify, you're from upstate New York, right?
That's right.
Watertown, I believe, is the city you're from.
That's correct.
So you're from that area, so you probably knew it from from as being a resident. But were you that plugged into the sort of the business aspect of the community?
Well, I was a resident, and although I hadn't been there that long, but in the process of evaluating properties, I spent the better part of a year looking at investment opportunities there, pretty much every day, and really did my homework. And I got a really good feel for what properties were valued at there, how the occupancy was for different types of buildings. And, when I really dug in and did my analysis on this building, I did inquire about vacancies in other places. I talked to the brokers and people who really had worked in that market for many, many years. And, the picture kind of started to fill in, and everything I found all pointed toward, hey, this could be a really exciting opportunity for me.
Okay, that's amazing. Kind of moving into that now, and I think people need to know here. You're also working full time while you're doing this, right? So you're looking for these properties and also working full time as a teacher, right?
I was working full time as a teacher, and but when you put your life savings in, you realize that in my case, I just couldn't stand the idea of trying to find a property manager. And I looked too, and I just felt like this is something I need to be personally involved in and hands-on. There's just too much at stake for me to do it any other way. So one of the biggest expenses of the property was payroll, and the property actually had a full-time superintendent on staff. And yet I could tell from all my many visits to the property that he really wasn't doing a whole lot. In fact, on one of my visits, I discovered in a building that was out back that he had set up a wood shop and was refinishing furniture while he was at work.
Oh, great.
So, my first day as owner of that property, I ended up firing the superintendent, and I basically replaced him with myself.
Oh my gosh.
So, and that was tough. There was a period of time there where I had to do that while teaching. But what it did is it basically made the building cash flow on day one. And I was able to get up early, come in, clean up the property, open it up, make sure everything was in order. Then I'd go off to my day job and teach. And sometimes I'd make it back during my lunch hour, and often I'd make it back again at the end of the day. And, a teacher's schedule is somewhat forgiving in that respect, in that, we get a lot of holidays. There's, you get your summers off. So I was able to balance the two. And, after a couple of years of that, I was able to invest in bringing on my first full-time employee.
Wow. So you weren't just the superintendent, you were the maintenance crew as well, right?
Well, yeah, I did use contractors for a lot of stuff.
Oh, and, good. Okay.
That's part of the, you're absolutely right. When you don't have that experience and you go into an office building, this was a big property. And, I tell people that, hey, when I first walked into the boiler room, for example, I might as well have been in the control room of a spaceship. I had no idea what I was looking at. But I also knew I could pick up the phone and call somebody who understood it. And so I would rely on contractors who would come in and help me out with the things that I couldn't do myself.
That's great. And how many offices are there actually in the building? Or were there at the time? I know you can, I guess, reconfigure things, but...
Yeah, I think at the time there were approximately 20 suites.
Okay.
But like you say, as you have turnover, sometimes you combine them or carve them up. So it was about half full. And that first 2 years of ownership, I was able to completely fill up the rest of the property.
And it sounds like you tackled things like the having the heater on and the windows wide open. I would imagine.
Oh yeah,
that was probably one of the first things you took on.
Absolutely. In addition to the labor line item, the really high expenses were the taxes, and I had actually met with the assessor beforehand and found out that it was assessed at about 3 times what I was going to pay, and the assessor informed me that, hey, it's already been challenged and the assessment's going to be reduced, so my taxes got dropped by 2/3. And with the utility line item was the other big one, glaring expense. And that first day of ownership, one of the other issues that prompted me to fire the superintendent is I said, hey, can you show me where the controls are? And he took me to the room where the thermostat was, and I said, can you show me how to program it? And he said, I can't, it's locked. And I said, well, can you unlock it? And he said, I don't know how to unlock it. So I thought that was a pretty big clue that maybe something was wrong.
Wow.
So I actually, what I did is after I let him go, I looked up online and found the thermostat manufacturer. I called their customer service. They walked me through how to unlock it and program the controls. And it really wasn't very complicated. I was able to set it so that the air conditioning and the heat actually fluctuated with the temperature like it was supposed to. And I set it so that it would turn down in the evenings and weekends when no one was there. And that simple change cut the utility bills in half in that first year.
Wow. So you saw the direct impact on the bottom line, I imagine, pretty soon on that.
Absolutely.
Now, is it multiple floors? The office?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 floors.
3 floors. Stairs only or elevators?
Elevator.
Oh, you got an elevator too on that. Yipes. Oh man. Has that been pretty easy for you, or are there issues with elevators?
It's just another example of, anything when you're stepping into something like that, anything that's complicated or specialty, there's people out there, professionals that you can call, and that was my whole motivation behind writing my book, Crushing It in Apartments and Commercial Real Estate, is to share with people, it doesn't have to be difficult. You don't have to be intimidated. Regular investors have this opportunity to go out and do stuff like this. And frankly, there's plenty of folks out there that are willing to step up and help you to tackle whatever issues you might find. So, I don't have to know anything about elevators. Over time, you learn a little bit, you pick things up. But I pick up the phone and call an elevator company that would come in and service it or repair it as necessary. So it really wasn't something, it maybe initially, it's just another one of those things that might seem overwhelming, but, just having a phone number to pick up and call somebody it can be that easy.
That's great. Well, one of your other challenges you mentioned too was the financing part of it. That coming into this, there was an assumable loan, right?
That's right.
And you had to put, I would imagine, a considerable down payment there. Were there any additional bank financing?
No other bank financing. And actually, what was interesting is when the seller shared their, I found out what they were asking, which the building had been for sale for several years, and nobody was interested. So they kept lowering the price. And what I learned was that part of the asking price was for the seller to pay off their early prepayment penalty on their mortgage, and they actually had a prepayment penalty of more than $200,000 for their mortgage payoff. And so what I did was I asked them, I said, well, what if I were to assume this ugly mortgage you have, would you be willing to pass those savings on to me? And they were, because that, it didn't change their bottom line of what they hoped to walk away from. So I immediately got a substantial discount by agreeing to assume their mortgage. So it actually worked to my advantage and their advantage, because they were going to be able to sell the property.
So you were also able to get pretty creative then on your financing side of it. First time out. Wow, that's impressive.
And then, It was even after I turned the property around and I filled it up, I still couldn't get a bank to loan to me. As a new investor, I was really fortunate to assume a mortgage, and on my second property, I again found a situation where in the second case, the seller extended me owner financing for the second acquisition. And it was a similar type of situation where it was a distressed property. It was half empty. Seller really wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. They extended me owner financing that covered about 90% of that purchase, and I turned that property around as well. And it wasn't until I had two completely turned around full commercial properties before I finally got a bank to agree to lend to me.
Wow. Was that second one also an office, or what kind of building was that?
Second one was retail, and it was actually only a block away from the first one. So it was very convenient in terms of, being able to kind of move back and forth between the two and use similar contractors and kind of leverage, the efficiencies of being close by.
Are they older buildings or newer buildings?
The first one that I bought was built in the 1920s, so that's pretty old. The second one was a little bit newer. It was built in the 1980, I think late 1980s or early 1990s. So much, a much newer, not brand new, but more modern construction.
Was that kind of a just a series of shops?
Yeah, it's actually configured in a way that the different it's a single story, and it was broken into some storefronts. Some of the spaces could be used as offices. At the time they weren't, but since that time they've been used as office spaces. So it's kind of a little more flexible type of space.
So you have these two properties, and then the next time you went for a loan. Now, did you refinance these properties by any chance, or did you?
The first time, the very first time I got a bank, and once I assumed the first mortgage, I started trying to get my own refinance, because that first mortgage that I assumed had a lot of terms that were a real pain in the butt, frankly. And I tried to borrow money, and I got nothing but a lot of no's, and that lasted for 2 years, more than 2 years. And once I had those two properties turned around in full, I finally got one bank to agree to refinance them and to pull a little cash out. And what was interesting is when that first bank said yes, all of a sudden another bank that had always said no stepped up. And when they found out that I had a commitment letter from the first bank, all of a sudden they were interested again, and they gave me even better terms. So that was a big breakthrough for me, because I finally got a bank to say yes. I refinanced, I pulled cash out, and from there I was able to buy 3 more properties with the cash I pulled out. And I've purchased at least 2 to 3 properties every year since then.
Now, do you have any outside investors at all in any of your projects?
Do not have any outside investors. My strategy has kind of stayed pretty true to buying properties that have that opportunity to add value in some way, turn them around. I love properties that are poorly managed or not being managed to their potential, and I invest back into them, continue to do that. And if there's enough value there to safely refinance and pull some cash out, that's what I do. And I take that cash and I've used it to grow the portfolio. And I think it's been a huge advantage not to have investors, because it's allowed me the flexibility to continuously reinvest back into my properties and into my portfolio without having to pay money out to investors.
That's almost like envious. I mean, that's kind of the thing that I think a lot of investors would love to be able to do. And you've been building this portfolio for now roughly 10 years, right?
Yeah. Yep. So we've got over 30 properties now, and to this day I still invest the vast majority of any cash flow that it throws off back into the portfolio.
Interesting. How long did you continue teaching? Are you still teaching? I don't know.
Well, that, you know what, that's an interesting question because I really was motivated early on to get sort of that additional cash flow to help me pay my bills. And I looked at real estate in a different way when I first got started. But once I was there every day and I was giving it my all and working hard at it, I was an entrepreneur like any other, and it changes how you look at it and how you feel about it. And I realized I couldn't bring myself to pull money out. I was afraid that it might lead to the building failing, and I had too much at stake. So I got in this mode where I said, no, this business means too much to me. This is too important. I'm going to invest everything back in. And, that's been a really, really good strategy. It worked really well. And so the problem with that, as you can imagine, is as the portfolio began to grow, I still had that day job. And while I started to hire employees, started to become an increasingly difficult challenge to balance my work between the two and still perform at a high level, which was very important to me. And when I got about 6 years in, I realized I needed to either hire somebody to run my company or step down from my teaching job. And I initially hired somebody for the CEO role, but it just didn't work out the way I hoped. And so ultimately, it was at the 7-year mark. The revenues at my company had hit $2 million a year. And I had a number of employees, around a dozen employees at that time, who were counting on the company, and I felt like it was just too important. So while I really enjoyed my teaching, I did resign from that job, and from that point forward, I've worked full time on my real estate.
So did you carve out a little office in one of those buildings where your team?
I did. It's kind of people get a real kick out of the first office we had, because on the bottom floor of the building, you go down the stairs into the lower basement level, and right at the very bottom of the stairs, tucked underneath the stairway, was sort of a utility cubby that no one used for anything other than storage, and I actually emptied it out and put a desk in there, and that was my office.
You didn't want to take any rentable space, right?
That's exactly right. We realized, hey, we have to have some place to work out of, but boy, we don't want to give up a single square foot of rentable space, and we determined that was the least rentable square footage in the entire building. And so we set up shop there, and we were there for a number of years. I actually had 3 employees, and we were still working out of this tiny little space with one desk.
And a mop and a bucket next to your desk, probably.
That's actually, and a lot more other junk. So, but we've got a little more space now. We're at 17 employees, and
wow.
We do still have our headquarters in that first office building, though, and the vast majority of our properties are within about a 30-minute drive of that location still. So we're still hands-on, and there's a ton of efficiencies associated with that, and gives us a huge advantage over out-of-state investors or owners who are absentee owners. So.
Oh, I would imagine that's fascinating. Well, with all that you've done and here over this last 10-year period, what would you say was sort of your biggest mistake that you learned from in this process?
Well, I would, first thing I would say is that I make a lot of mistakes. It's fun to, especially on a podcast, you love to talk about all the things that went right, but the truth is that there are things that go wrong every day and still do. And it's always a learning process. And so a lot of mistakes. I think, you tend to think about the ones that maybe cost you the most money as, sort of the bigger ones. And I would say we've we've taken bigger and bigger chances as I've grown, and we've gone after some very distressed properties and in attempts to turn them around. And in one instance, we purchased a apartment building at a foreclosure auction, and we had very limited access to the property ahead of time. I was able to get in and do a cursory walkthrough, and we had done a successful turnaround of a similar property right before that, and I think we were overly optimistic about this particular property, and we purchased it at the foreclosure auction, and it very quickly became known around the office as the money pit. Every time we opened up something, we found something else. Every repair led to the discovery of things behind the walls that we really wished weren't there. And we ended up doing some environmental abatements in there. And in the end, we halted the work we were doing and ended up completely gutting it and redoing all of the mechanicals and structural, and it just was a complete redo, and we lost a lot of money on that. So the building was an older building. It was a converted Victorian. It had 20 units in the main house, and it had another 8 in a carriage house. And by the time we finished the main house, we looked at the carriage house and decided to tear it down and not even try. So we lost a lot of money. And I think what we learned from that experience was, if you buy a property at auction, you can sometimes get a great deal, but you can oftentimes, you gotta plan with a lot of contingencies and a lot of buffer, because especially if you don't have a lot of access, there could be a lot of hidden problems that you're unaware of. And you're taking a big chance.
Yeah. Wow. Sounds like a nice house, though. It sounds like it's beautiful.
Hey, and actually, the end product, we're pretty proud of it. There are beautiful apartments in there now, and it looks fantastic unless you look at what we spent on it.
Really, yeah. As long as you don't look at the financials, it's a great thing.
Exactly. It's beautiful now, and the end product is something to be proud of, and it's just a huge boost for the neighborhood. But wow, it just financially it set us back, and thank God it wasn't one of my first 3 or 5 deals, or it might have been my last.
Wow. Well, conversely, what would you say your biggest success was in the last 10 years?
Well, I mentioned when I told you about the mistake that we had just done a successful turnaround of another property, and so I'd point to that one, and that was an even bigger apartment building that had 70 units. And I actually have the full story of that turnaround and the mistake in my book. But that was another one we bought at foreclosure auction. And it was a highly distressed property, a lot of criminals and a lot of criminal activity there, a lot of the pest infestations and the works. And we went in and tackled that, and it ended up being a very rewarding project for our company and for the community. It was a successful turnaround in the end. So that was good for everybody involved. Except for the criminals and the pests. It didn't work out so well for them.
I love it. Wow. How about looking at our audience with mixes, primarily 50-plussers, people that are either they're in a W-2 job now and they're approaching their retirement, they're concerned, they want to be able to know that they've got a promising retirement ahead, that they have the funds that they're going to need in that retirement, or there are people that are already dealing with retirement and they're looking to supplement what they already have, or to leverage their investments for the long term. What kind of advice would you have for somebody that's saying, "Gosh, this commercial sounds really interesting to me"? What advice would you have for those that might want to get started in that?
Well, I think it really depends on the specific investor, but what I think your listeners should be aware of is just that there are opportunities. I know you hear a lot about, hey, you could be a completely passive investor, and that's fine. That might be the right thing for some people. Just recognize that there's some additional risk with that because you're completely relying on somebody else to manage properties, and real estate is a business like any other. It doesn't matter if you have apartments or commercial real estate, or you've got, a hair salon or a flower shop. It's a business with customers, and somebody's got to be there, taking care of it and running it. And you have another opportunity, and that would be to be more involved in commercial and residential real estate. You're actually getting a huge advantage if you're willing to be local, stay local with your investment, and be hands-on. And I've met so many retirees who are successfully managing commercial and residential properties, and they, for the most part, the ones who are involved tend to love it and find it rewarding. They develop relationships with the tenants. They take pride in their properties. They enjoy the flexibility of the schedule that it offers. Some of them will still hand things off, like if they're up north where I am, they'll hand things off for a few months while they head south for the winter. So there's still that flexibility, but it can be, real estate, as opposed to being something that's fully passive. You can save a lot of money and, manage your risk by being involved if you choose to, and it can be very rewarding. So it's an option that's out there. It's not the type of option that most gurus and investors are promoting, but it's very real, and there's a ton of retirees out there that are very happy with their choice to be actively involved in real estate investing.
That's great. Well, what's ahead for you in your business? I mean, do you have some longer, shorter term goals that where you'd like to take this?
Yeah, we're super excited about the effect that we're having on the revitalization of the community that we're involved in. We're continuing to do deals. Personally, I've found it very rewarding. I've got a number of folks that I'm mentoring, and I spent quite a bit of time over the last couple of years putting together everything that I've learned, the mistakes I've made, and putting it into a book. I realized I get more requests to try to mentor people than I could ever possibly do justice to, and there's a limit to that. But it's important to me to kind of get the word out there. I want other people to be able to do what I've done. It's really not as difficult as people think, and I should say it's not complicated. It's hard work. But it's not as complicated or out of reach as most people think, and I want people to know that. So I've been trying to get that word out and help people who want to do something like what I've done.
That's fantastic. Well, we're definitely going to have a link to your book in our show notes. So anybody that wants to be able to get access to that, I think that's a fantastic resource. I want to read it. I'm like so excited about it. It sounds like a great resource. Gosh, this time has zipped by very quickly here, and we have kind of come to nearing the end of the show here. We have a little thing we call Wrap It Up, where you share sort of your favorite resources so that folks that want to move forward can tap into some of those for their education's sake. So,
hello, fellow old dogs. Before we jump into our Wrap It Up session, I just wanted to let you know that an important part of being a successful real estate investor is knowing how to regularly reduce expenses. It's a big part of what I do every day to maintain a healthy real estate portfolio. Well, I try to do the same thing with my personal finances as well. When I heard about a health insurance company that gave special rates to those of us old dogs who try to eat right, exercise, and stay healthy, I got very stoked. Health IQ gives health-conscious people the best life insurance rates and quotes. Learn about what they can do for you specifically at healthiq.com/old dog. That's all lowercase letters, and dog is spelled DAWG. That's healthiq.com/old dog. Check them out.
If you are ready, we can go ahead and move into our wrap it up session. Are you ready?
Sure, sounds good.
All right. Favorite real estate book?
Well, one of the resources I used often was the Complete Guide to Buying and Selling Apartment Buildings by Steve Burgess. He places a little more emphasis on short-term holding, where I'm very much a buy and hold longer term, but there was a lot of great information in there. But I think more important just with real estate books is you tend to walk away with a different nugget from each and every one. So, I've encouraged people to I don't really have any one single favorite. I try to take bits and pieces from pretty much every book I pick up.
That's a great book too. Yeah, we have our top 20 real estate books. That's one of them. Excellent resource. How about your favorite business book?
You have probably picked up. I'm a really avid reader. And so I'm constantly uncovering different ones that are my favorite at any time. One of the ones I read recently that I really liked was The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. And, real estate, like I mentioned, it's a business like any other, which means you're going to have a lot of setbacks and you're going to hit a lot of obstacles. And I found Ryan Holiday's book inspiring. It really gives you a lot of examples of how something that might initially seem like an obstacle is really an opportunity, and if you use your creativity and work hard, and you can turn those obstacles into advantages. So I enjoyed his book.
Excellent reference. How about most valuable website for success, other than your own, of course?
Well, if I think about what I use often. And what helped me when I first was getting started, I spent a ton of time on LoopNet.com, and I'm sure many of your listeners are already familiar with LoopNet. It's the largest commercial real estate listing website out there. And what I loved about LoopNet is that it can be an educational tool. People don't think of it that way, but a lot of the commercial listings will include memoranda and pro formas and financials on properties that you can dig through and learn a lot by going through that stuff. So I think it's a gold mine for people who are trying to educate themselves on commercial real estate. That's
a great reference. I think that a lot of people don't see that on LoopNet, and I know as those of us that do invest in commercial, just sometimes you get an offering memorandum. You get more information about a market, and from some of the biggest commercial real estate companies in the world, and there's just always a lot of great info in there. And it's also a good place to practice your underwriting skills, and get a hold of some of the financials and work the numbers. And so I think that's a great one. How about a favorite app? Do you have an app that helps you in your day-to-day business?
I would say the app that I use the most is the Apple's podcast app. And so I think, if anybody who's out there listening, you're doing the right thing. Like, you're doing the same thing I do, at least, which is to listen to podcasts. I think it's a tremendous resource. So, I spend a lot of time driving, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners do as well. And what a great way to make your drive time productive, educating yourself with excellent real estate podcasts like this one. So hats off to your listeners.
Second that choice, not just because I have a podcast, but because I'm a podcast junkie. I listen to lots of podcasts, so I think it's a great resource. How about favorite quote?
I've got a lot of favorite quotes. I think one of them that comes to mind that I'm a big fan of is from Vince Lombardi, and it's the quality of a person's life is in direct proportion to their commitment to excellence, regardless of their chosen field of endeavor. So I love that quote because I think that, if you commit to excellence in whatever you do, the rewards are going to come.
Good. Now, our final question. This is kind of a hypothetical situation. Let's say you lost everything, all your business, all your assets, except for $1,000 in cash. What would you do to try to rebuild what you had before?
Well, I think that to prepare yourself as an investor, a lot of the things that you can do that are most beneficial don't cost you a lot of money. So $1,000 could go pretty far. Devour the podcasts, read as many books as possible, and learn from other people. So I'd take a chunk of that, maybe look at the people that are in your marketplace who've done what you want to do, and take them to lunch and pick their brain. Devour as much information as you can. There's a lot of creative financing opportunities in real estate, so you can figure out how to get started with very little cash. Those opportunities are not easy to find, but they're out there. And I would have to say that, I think you also, if I had to start over, the first thing I would do is I'd go out and I'd get a job, and I really don't even care what it would be. I'd gladly work at a fast food place or anywhere else where I could just pay the bills and, not try to live off of my real estate. It wasn't easy. I know firsthand it can be a challenge to balance the two, but I have too many aspiring investors who come to me who are all ready to quit their jobs and they haven't even bought the first property yet. But a chunk of that $1,000 would probably have to go to a nice outfit to do my interviews and get a job.
Good one. I love it. This is great. So how can folks, find out more about you or reach your organization? What would be the best ways for them to reach you?
The website for the book is crushingit.info, and on crushingit.info you'll find contact the author. You can reach me through a message there, and then my corporate website is washingtonstreetproperties.com. I'm also active on LinkedIn, so any of those would be a great way for listeners to reach out to me.
Great. Well, Brian, as you know from previously, we always close out our show with a howl from our guests here. So if you are ready, we will go ahead and initiate our closing howl. Are you ready, Brian?
Oh, I've been practicing all week for this. I'm all set. Driving my dog nuts.
I love it. All right, well, go for it. Oh, that was good. That was a good one. We just had our awards, so this is going to be entered in the next year's awards for our Golden Howl Award. Right. So you never know.
Fingers
Brian.
Crossed.
This could change your life here. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Brian. I really, really appreciate it. Just some great information, great insight, and just your perspective and attitude are just so encouraging, positive. It's refreshing.
Well, thank you, Bill. It was a real pleasure to speak with you, and a real honor to be on your show.
Well, it's my pleasure. And I want to thank all our old dog listeners out there, too. It's just great that you took the time. I know there's a ton of other podcasts out there. We were just talking about that. And the fact that you took the time to listen to ours really means a lot. And we just want you to know everything that Brian said today, especially a link to his book and his website, some of the references that he made, everything's accessible in our show notes. So I hope you weren't driving down the highway trying to write these things down. So everything's there for your reference. It's at olddogsreinetwork.com/blog. And then just look for Brian Murray and his podcast. So thank you so much. This is the show for today. Remember, cash flow is king, real estate investing the means. And until next time, keep moving forward and may God bless.
Thank you very much for visiting the Old Dogs REI Network. We would greatly appreciate if you would stop by iTunes and let us know what you think of the show. We would love if you could subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, and write a review. The more ratings and reviews we receive, the more visible the podcast will be to others. Thank you.